All had breakfast? No? Why? Milani, what's that? Oh, after my advice, planning not to eat? Yeah. So getting back, Master clear? So, the third chapter, the Mughals. The last one with North India. Marathas come with modern India, Marathas and Peshwas come with modern India. So the last one, we have the mighty Mughals. So it starts with 1526, it ends in 1858. So the mighty Mughals. So when you look at the Mughals, it's divided into two. It is divided into two periods, as we call it as the early Mughals and the later Mughals. So early Mughals and the later Mughals. When you look at early Mughals, the bracket starts from 1526 to 1707. And later Mughals, the bracket starts from 1707 to 1858. So clear, ma? This is about the Mughals overall. Get an overall idea? So now this early Mughals, we call this as an empire. This is the Mughal Empire. We call this as a dynasty. So with the death of Aurangzeb, medieval gets over. So medieval gets over here. 1707, medieval India gets over. Clear? So from 1707 to 1858, we go with modern. So now what to study here? Here with early Mughals, we have some rulers. We start with Babur being the founder, the last early Mughal ruler being Aurangzeb. So here later Mughals we start with Bahadur Shah 1 and here we start with Bahadur Shah the 2. So clear? Get a rough idea. I hope now chronology is fine. We started with Paleolithic, Meso, Neo, Chalco. I'm revising Indus Valley, Vedic Age, Maurya, Mahajanapata, Maurya, Post-Maurya, Gupta, Harsha. Try to learn the brackets. Then coming on to medieval, Rajputs, North India, Delhi Sultanate, Mughals. That's it. So South is pending. South we've not yet touched. So when you look at it, Bahadur Shah 1 to Bahadur Shah 2. So this is our modern. So this comes with modern. Getting it? So we are not touching it. Our medieval gets over. Architecture, painting, dance, music, puppetry, what all we have in art and culture with language and literature, everything stops here with Aurangzeb, 1707. And modern starts with the advent of Europeans, then later Mughals, Marathas, independent kingdom, then they go with the Carnatic War, Plassey, Buxar, India under the East India Company. So that the transition of the next part is different. So now this, what do we need to study? Here, you need to know, the first part, you need to know the rulers. All the rulers you need to know. Getting it, ma? So if I give you a list of the rulers, if I give you the list, the first ruler being Babur, followed by Humayun. So after Humayun, there's a small gap of 15 years. We have Sher Shah Suri. I've written it in the notes. So 15 years, Sher Shah Suri and his successors were ruling. The third ruler, when you take it chronology, but Sher Shah was an Afghan. So we call this as an Afghan rule. So we call this as a second Afghan rule. Why? Because Lodhis were the first Afghan rulers since Lodhi. So Sher Shah, we don't count him under Mughal. The next one immediately comes again, Humayun's second term. Humayun will rule for the first term, Humayun's second term. Then comes the great Akbar. Then comes Jahangir. Then comes Shah Jahan. And the last ruler being Aurangzeb. You need to know, see, they are very small. It's a very big kingdom, but the ruler numbers are very small. Babur to Aurangzeb. So Babur, Humayun, Akbar, Jahangir, Shah Jahan, Aurangzeb. In between, we have a small interregnum, a small gap of how many years we have that interregnum? 15 years of interregnum. Interregnum is a small gap. 15 years, Sher Shah and his successors ruled India. So that 15 years, what do we call? We call it as a Sur Empire or the Sur Dynasty. So you need to know the rulers in order. Why? Because UPSC is now asking question. Getting it, trying to recollect it. So this is the introduction. And when you look at the Mughal Empire, I'll take you to the next page. If you look at the Mughal Empire, they had their capitals at, Mughals had their capitals at, first capital they had it at Delhi. Then they had their capital at Agra. Then they had their capital at Fatehpur Sikri. Then again they came back to Agra. Then for 1 year, capital was at Lahore. And then they had their capital at Allahabad. Then again they came back to Agra. Then the capital Delhi. How many? Getting it? So you need to know this. That's what I'm telling. Capitals. So when you look at it, Delhi was the capital for Babur. Delhi was the capital for Humayun. And initially, Akbar had Delhi as his capital initially. For few years, Humayun's tomb is in Delhi. Akbar constructed Humayun's tomb. During the tutelage of Bairam Khan, Akbar had his capital at Delhi. Getting it, ma? Then who shifted the capital to Agra? Akbar shifted it. So if I give you exactly 1562, Akbar shifted the capital to Agra. Just know that. Getting it, Akbar shifted. Again, what happened? Akbar in 1571, Akbar shifted it to Fatehpur Sikri. So who's only shifting? Akbar is only shifting, ma. So getting it now. For 12 years, Fatehpur Sikri was a capital. So in 1583, again, Akbar shifted it back where? Akbar shifted it back to Agra. So I repeat, Babur, Humayun had capital at Delhi. After Humayun comes Sher Shah. Sher Shah Suri and his successors. They all had their capital at Delhi. After Sher Shah went, Humayun comes for the second term. I've written it here, ma. Could you see this part? 15 years. Humayun comes for the second term. This is Humayun's first term. Humayun will come for 2 terms. He'll go, Sher Shah will pluck the kingdom. Then after Sher Shah fell, his successors took the kingdom. Successors were not able to take it properly. Then, the dynasty is disintegrated. Again, Humayun will rule. When Humayun comes back, Delhi only was the capital. So getting it, so Babur, Humayun, Akbar. So I'm not taking Sher Shah, Delhi only. So Akbar, what happened? He thought, let's go to Agra. Why? The reason you need to know, Delhi had a water problem. Getting it? You might think it's Yamuna is there. But they were all living near that New Delhi, that old Delhi region. So the water of Yamuna was not getting inside. Because Delhi has got a rugged topography. So Akbar thought that, why can't I go to the banks of Yamuna? So he shifted the capital to Agra, Red Fort and all of them. So he shifted it to Agra. And from being at Agra, Akbar got to know that he was very much inclined towards Sufism. So Akbar was in touch with a very great Sufi called Sheikh Salim Chishti. So immediately Akbar went there, and after seeing him, Akbar gave birth to a son. A son was born, Salim, who was Jahangir. So after that, Akbar thought, why can't I be here itself? And Fatehpur Sikri is even more in the depth of Agra. Getting it, so Akbar went to Fatehpur Sikri for 12 years. Akbar had its capital at Fatehpur Sikri. 12 years. That's why in Fatehpur Sikri we have Jodhabai's palace, Birbal's palace, Buland Darwaza, Ibadat Khana, Diwani Am, Diwani Khas, Jamma Masjid. Have you heard all these? All these places are there in Fatehpur Sikri. We'll do it tomorrow. Architecture. Then 12 years, Fatehpur Sikri, Akbar again shifted back to Agra in 1583. So why? Because again Fatehpur Sikri had a water problem. So water again was a problem. Even today, Fatehpur Sikri has got a water problem. So what happened? Akbar in 1584 to 1585, he had his capital at Lahore. This is a strategic reason. Akbar was wanting to protect the border. So Akbar for 1 year, 84 to 85, he had his capital at Lahore for 1 year. This is for 1 year only. Now what happened? Again in 85, Akbar shifted back where? Agra. Are you all there? Just get to know, ma. So who maximum shifted? I'm giving you the year so that you study it. So again Akbar shifted back to Agra in 1585. Then again what happened? For 1 day, Akbar kept Allahabad as his capital, only 1 day. So Allahabad was a capital for only a single day, that is in 1585. Getting only 1 day, Prayagraj, and Akbar renamed Prayag as Allahabad. So who gave the name Allahabad? Akbar. Akbar only is renaming it, that 1 day he had a big ceremony and he renamed Prayag as Allahabad. That became Allahabad. So one day, it's like one day CM, one day capital. And imagine when they go, they'll take everything and go. It's not like one day they just go and they finish everything and they come. They'll go take all the procedures, all of them, the family members, they'll go one day. After 1585, Akbar again came back to Agra. So who shifted it back to Agra? Only Akbar. Akbar, all shifting. And imagine such a busy king. Generally people in history, as of I know, all the kings who are very free, very lethargic, who have no other job to do, they will only shift. But he was a very busy man on earth. Akbar was very busy, but kept on shifting. Why? As a convention, he did it. Plus, some other issues also started coming. So, till Akbar, Agra became the capital. Then from Agra to Delhi, who shifted the capital? Shah Jahan shifted the capital from Agra to Delhi. So, getting a Red Fort, he constructed the Red Fort and he came back to Delhi. So, after Shah Jahan, Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb had Delhi. The later Mughals all had their capital at Delhi. So, Delhi became the capital of the Mughals. So, imagine all these changes. Who brought it? Akbar. So, you may later you may get it in your mains. May get it because which among the following rulers shifted which capital and all. So, this is just a passing by thing. So, learn the capital. So, Mughal capitals are these. Clear? So, in prelims, if they ask you, Allahabad was the capital of the Mughals. Yes, one day. Even one day, Royal Farman, Akbar made it. So, we had a capital. Clear? Then, what was the court language of Mughals? Persian followed by Turkish. Getting it? What was the religious language of the Mughals? The religious language of the Mughals was Arabic. Mughals were Sunni Muslims. So, Mughals were not Shias. In Islam, there are two divisions, the Shias and the Sunni Muslim. Mughals were Sunni Muslims. So, they were a little bit orthodox in that. And Mughals never accepted the overlordship of the Caliph. They never accepted the overlordship of the Caliph. So, anyone who accepts the overlordship of the Khalifa, they were called Sultan. Mughals were not Sultan. So, what are the titles Mughal rulers took? They always call themselves as Badshah. So, Mughal calls them as Badshah. In South, we say Badshah. We use the term P. Badshah, Badshah. So, Mughals were never Sultan. They never accepted the Caliph as their overlord. But they had huge respect for the Caliph. Respect was there. They used to send gifts. Akbar sent presents. Lots of present. Akbar gave it to the Caliph. So, that was all there. So, this is about the Mughals. So, rulers, you need to study. Then about their court language, their capital, and about all of them, their policies, their significance, just in a nutshell. Then Mughals were called as Badshah. So, Babur till Aurangzeb, they ruled. When you look at Babur, I'll just give you a small nutshell because UPSC is now asking little bit of tiny, minute details. Since you look at it, we all return? Shall we go? See, Babur was a ruler. I'm just going you with a story. So, listen to the story. Then you read the handouts what I give you because I told you these two are there. This two, I have the PDF with me as I told you. You can take the soft copy. Hard copy, it will take time for them to print it out and all. Soft copy will be better for this because I've written it. Babur was a ruler of Fargana, Central Asia. His father died early. So Babur, he was ruling there. His maternal uncles took the throne and they put Babur in the street. So Babur, with lots of hardships, reached Afghanistan. When he came to Afghanistan, Babur was he became a noble in the Afghan politics, being a Turk. But being in Afghanistan, there was a war of succession happening in Afghanistan. So Babur used that opportunity and he took the throne of Afghanistan, became the ruler of Afghanistan. And then what happened? Babur started thinking, there was a Sufi saint who blessed Babur that he would rule Hindustan. So from then on, Babur started to think that let me occupy Hindustan. So he was trying to work on it, but he couldn't. Because Ibrahim Lodi was the last ruler, last ruler. Now what happened? One day, Babur got a letter. The letter when he opened, it was from a governor of Punjab called Daulat Khan Lodi. So Daulat Khan Lodi sent a letter to Babur telling, please help me to defeat Ibrahim Lodi. But before this letter, there was a Rajput ruler called Rana Sanga of Mewar. He sent a letter to Babur telling that, help me to defeat Ibrahim Lodi. So Babur got two letters. He accepted both the invitation and Babur entered India, he fought the first battle of Panipat and killed Ibrahim Lodi in 1526 and occupied Delhi. So that is how Mughals occupied. So who were Mughals? If you look at the term Mughals, it is derived from the term Mongol. Mongol, Mughal, Mughals. Getting it? So Mughals were Mongols. Getting it? They were half Mongol. Babur was related to Genghis Khan from his mother's side. And Babur was related to Taimur from his father's side. So two great, scholars, their blood were running in the veins of Babur. Mother was a Mongol, father was a Turk. And generally we are paternal patriarch. We take our father's side. So we call Mughals as Turk because his father was a Turk. So that's why we call them as Turco-Mongoloids. Why? Half Turk, half Mongol. Babur entered India. But when Babur came to India, Babur ruled only for 4 years. He wanted to establish a strong foundation here. So he never declared Kabul as his capital. He made Delhi as his capital because Kabul is so far. Then the entire mainland will declare independence. The first threat what Babur faced was Rana Sanga. So Babur in 1527, he fought a battle called Battle of Kanua with Rana Sanga, defeated Rana Sanga, occupied Mewar. The entire Mewar family, Rana Sanga's family, went to the deep forest. And this Rana Sanga had his wife, Rani Karnavati, the widow of Rana Sanga. She took a pledge that I will defeat the Mughals by planting my sons in the throne of Delhi. I will make a Hindu rule coming up in North India by killing the Mughals. So Rani Karnavati took a pledge. And this Rana Sanga's daughter-in-law is Meera. You know the Bhakti saint Meera? So Rana Sanga had an eldest son called Raja Bhoj. Raja Bhoj, his wife was Meera. The Bhakti saint Meera who was singing about Krishna. So which means Meera is a contemporary of Babur, Rana Sanga, that group. So now Rani Karnavati had gone to the forest and all her sons are very small. She is raising them. So then Babur fought 2 more battles. The entire India is under his control. So 1530, when Babur was having the entire North India, he fell sick. Babur actually was not well because, it is said he had typhoid. So the continuous journey, 1526, 27, 28, 29, continuous battle. Babur never took rest. The moment he came, and how did Babur win in Indian battle? He was the first to use gunpowder artillery. Gunpowder, already Chinese had gunpowder. In India, the Vijayanagar and Bahmani kingdom had gunpowder. But gunpowder was not used in war. Gunpowder was used in breaking a granite hill, breaking a quarry. To dig well, people used to keep gunpowder and explode. So gunpowder was never used in a war. So who was the first to use gunpowder in artillery war? Babur. So since he used guns, Babur had lots of guns. He was able to win the first battle of Panipat. One of the success of Babur is only this. He was a great scholar. Babur was a scholarly person. He was a practical statesman. He was a loving husband, a kind father, getting a very disciplined ruler. You can, if you want to quote someone for highest discipline, you can quote Babur in your essay. Even Aurangzeb was a disciplinarian. Such a disciplined person. Babur plans everything meticulously. He thinks that after 2 days I'll come to Agra, he'll be there on time. No one can beat Babur in punctuality. Babur says I'll be there at 9, he'll be there at 8:30. So Babur was that a disciplinarian, everything on time. When he says something, he do it. That kind of a person, that continuous war made Babur feel sick. And Babur had typhoid, he was not knowing it. So when he came back, he died. The moment he died, his son Humayun became the next ruler. That's why we have the second ruler called, who's the second ruler? Humayun. But Humayun was not like Babur. See, in history, I always tell one thing. All great fathers don't give birth to great sons. There's always a genetic disorder in history. Akbar's son was not Akbar. Getting it? Gandhi's son was not Gandhi. Gandhi fought against alcohol, but Gandhi's first son was an alcohol addict. Getting it? So, which means great sons don't give birth to great father. Genetic disorder is there in between. Humayun, yeah, we have lots of examples. We had one great Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, Karunanidhi. My Chief Minister long back, Karunanidhi, was a great scholar and a very stubborn, very strong personality, no doubt, as a CM. But we have a son, Stalin, now as a chief minister. Okay. My Article 19. Are you getting to? You can't say, ma'am, how? My chief minister, my Article 19. Are you getting to? He's like, okay, only, not that strong. Karunanidhi used to take lots of decisions like this. But Stalin is like, okay. Are you getting it? But like that. Everyone, and you put yourself also. I always tell this also. Nehru had a very strong daughter, Indira Gandhi. Indira Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi. Now, Rahul. Are you getting it? But Rahul is actually in South, Rahul is cherished in a very different way. Not like how you all laugh at North. Here people call him what? Yeah, but actually in North, South he's got a very different name. It's how you see. But Kejriwal, people mock at Kejriwal here. But in South, Kejriwal is a very big person. We have a very big mindset of Arvind Kejriwal. In South, he is glorified. That we need a separate class. Yeah. Even Rahul Gandhi is hailed in a very different way in South. Are you getting? We have a very different perspective. We don't laugh at him. The moment I say Rahul Gandhi, you all are laughing. Are you getting it? But we don't. We have a very different way for him. See, look at people still laughing. Yeah, that's fine. See, that's subjective. You may like a ruler, you may not, but democracy, things keep going. Fine. Yeah? That's a democracy. Yeah, that's what my people like, dislike, that's there. Everywhere. And you know the politics, what's happening around. Let's see what happens. Yeah. Now, coming on to Humayun. Humayun was not like Babur. Babur was a very strict person, very sharp, very shrewd, cunning. Babur was having all these traits of a king. A king should be smart, but Humayun was humane. Humayun, humane. Say for example, if you all go and cry to Humayun telling Humayun, I didn't study for prelims, he'll cancel prelims. Humayun was that kind of a king. Just give 2 tears to Humayun. He'll say, okay, don't worry, don't cry. I'll abolish prelims. So Humayun was that kind of a very emotional, impulsive. He goes with the human state of mind. He was a poet. He was a naturalist. He was a kind of a realist one. He was like that kind of a person, very emotional. Someone cries, he'll also sit and cry with them. Humayun was like that kind of a person. He did do some conquest, but not like his father. Because of this character, what Humayun had, there was a ruler of Bihar called Sher Khan, who was Sher Shah Suri. He made a plan, and in 1540, he defeated Humayun and he occupied the throne. Humayun ran. Humayun was literally leading a life of refugee for the 15 years. When Sher Shah Suri and his successors were ruling, 15 years Humayun was running from pillar to post. In that 15 years, Humayun gave birth to Akbar. Akbar was born when Humayun was a refugee only. Getting it? He was not born when Humayun was a king. That's what when Humayun saw young Akbar, Humayun just lamented out telling, my son, when I was born, my father was a king. When my father was born, his father was a king. But when you are born, I am a refugee. So I promise on you that I will definitely make you the king. So Akbar transformed Humayun. All the character what Humayun had, he had to overcome that because now he is given birth to a son. And the only son whom Humayun had was Akbar. Akbar was born at Rajasthan at Amarkot. So Humayun gave Akbar to his friend Raja Veer Sala, telling, you take care of Akbar. That's why Akbar grew up in a Rajput environment. He learned, Akbar heard Ramayana. Akbar knew Mahabharata. Initial stages, Akbar used to dress up like a Hindu. Akbar used to have a tilak in his forehead when he was a child. So Akbar grew up with that Rajput environment, made Akbar to ease it out. Then later came a teacher called Bairam Khan, who taught Islam to Akbar. The ulemas came, they were taking tuitions for Akbar. Then the Islamic faith was taught to Akbar. Then very frequently, Humayun will come from Persia. Humayun ran to Persia. From Persia, he'll come to visit Akbar. So Akbar's life was very much like this only. So Akbar did not have a very nice upbringing. He was under the Rajput influence. Then his paternal uncles, they troubled Akbar. So Akbar was into multiple hands. So Akbar never had proper education. He was an illiterate. And basically Akbar did not like to study. You tell Akbar to study, he'll be like, no, hunting, fighting. So Akbar from childhood was a warrior. We use the term some are born warrior, some are made a warrior. So Akbar naturally was inclined towards warrior skills and all of them. So when Bairam Khan saw these qualities in Akbar, Akbar thought, why can't I develop that? That is why Akbar was an undisputed ruler. He was never defeated. No one defeated Akbar in India. He was a man of success only. And seeing all of them, Akbar became that, compassionate ruler. On seeing, because growing up in a Hindu environment, father a Sunni Muslim, mother a Shia Muslim, his teacher Bairam Khan a Shia, getting it, his friends were all Hindus, wives were all Rajputs. So that mixed environment made Akbar liberal. So that liberal mentality made Akbar to have certain policies for India. I always tell this, a ruler's background, a ruler's psychosis play a very important role in politics. That's why that early upbringing, example, out of the box, Hitler had a very bad childhood. Hitler had a miserable, pathetic teenage. His adulthood was full of sorrow and misery. He had a very good, luxurious life. Money was never a problem for Hitler, but hearts were a problem. You have money, but no heart. Hitler never saw people with heart. He saw only people with money. Whoever came to Hitler, they came to Hitler for money. When Hitler understood that, he lost the essence of heart. He was not enough coming from a poor family and all. Money was never a problem for Hitler. Trust was a problem for Hitler. Emotion was a problem for Hitler. He was cheated continuously. And when a person gets cheated, naturally Hitler, he did not have a very good life in his family. Arguing parents, fighting parents, abusive father. Hitler had a very big abusive father. Shh, just stay quiet, I'm getting disturbed. Who's talking? So that abusiveness and almost that schooling of Hitler, residential boarding school, that also made where Hitler was bullied by the Jews. The Jews bullied Hitler because of his stature. Body shaming, are you getting it? Hitler was short for his stature and all of them Hitler was bullied. So Hitler couldn't digest all of them. So that naturally built up and there was no one to tell him that it was wrong. Either you need to have family to tell it's wrong, or you need to have teachers to tell you it's wrong, or you need to have friends to tell you it's wrong, or you need to have a good society to give you one putt. German society was not that great at that point of time when Hitler emerged. The German society itself was in a pathetic state. So society was very vulnerable and the society was very much evil. So how could an evil society teach you ethics? So Hitler grew up in this situation only. How will that man be? He became heights of arrogance, heights of attitude, heights of cruelness and brutality was Hitler. You tear Hitler, only these will come out. He was a barbaric kind of a person. That all doesn't come overnight. When a person is barbarian, we use the term barbarian. Genghis Khan, a barbarian. Overnight, he didn't transform a barbarian. These qualities come from childhood or somewhere in adulthood or somewhere in teens. They get it in the early life. Somewhere they grasp it and they make that to dominate their life. If I make arrogance to dominate my life, if I choose, I will become arrogant. If I choose to take satyagraha and I follow that, I become a satyagrahi. It's what you choose in life. Gandhi chose satyagraha. Hitler chose brutality. So there are two personalities. And don't you think everything is a choice? As I told you yesterday, pain is everywhere. It's choose which pain. You have pain in both sides. Choose your pain wisely. Because life is what? Full of pain. So Gandhi chose, even though satyagraha is painful only. Do you think satyagraha is an easy act? To become a satyagraha, you have to toil like anything. Penance. Penance is the foremost thing in satyagraha. Fasting is there in satyagraha. Giving up all the worldly pleasures is there in satyagraha. Sticking on to truth till you die. I think that's all painful. In today's world, sticking on to that, you have to give up. Self-sacrifice is there in satyagraha. So all these are not easy ones. Non-violence. Each and every activity what you do, it's not that easy. So choose your path to be Hitler or to be Gandhi. That's why I always call these as extreme opposites. One always going towards that himsa, that is violence. One going to ahimsa, non-violence. So this is how it is. So kings are made like that. Hitler chose the negative path. So automatically what happened? Hitler became what? A brutal, fanatic ruler. So likewise, when you look at Humayun, he was a very, in your language, in your Gen Z language, if I say, he was a cool cat. He was chilling out. He was like that carefree attitude was there with Humayun. Because of his character, he lost the kingdom to Sher Shah. Sher Shah ruled only for 5 years. That 5 years, Sher Shah developed India like anything. Getting it, Sher Shah made all the systems so beautiful. The rupee, what we use today, was introduced by Sher Shah. It was called Rupaya. So every denomination was there in Sher Shah's coin. So coins played a very important role in Sher Shah's kingdom. The postal system, what we have today, Sher Shah introduced. The Grand Trunk Road, GT Road, that was built by Chandragupta Maurya, but no one connected it. Sher Shah connected the GT Road from Sonargaon, from Bangladesh to Peshawar. So Sher Shah did lots, postal, road, irrigation, land reform, Rupaya, all of them. 5 years only he ruled, but he suppressed all the dacoits in North India. North was full of people were doing highway robbery, highway theft, killing, strangling. These cultures started coming up in North. So Sher Shah killed all of them and created a sense of fear, which means police reforms. He developed all of them, but in an accident, Sher Shah died. There was a gunpowder explosion, it exploded. Sher Shah died in 1545. His successors became the ruler. The next 10 years, his successors ruled. So Sher Shah 5, 10 years his successors, they were weak. So when they were weak, we call it a Sur dynasty. With Sher Shah, we call it a Sur empire or the Suri empire. When the last ruler was ruling, the last Suri ruler was ruling, Sikandar Shah, Humayun was at Persia. So Humayun comes to Afghanistan, he fought a battle and Humayun took the power and he became the ruler for the second term. And only 8 months Humayun ruled. When he ruled, he slipped off from the stairs of his library. In Delhi, he constructed a library called Sher Mandal. So from the library, he slipped off. Tomorrow, I'll be giving you the architecture part. There, I'll give you the name of the library. I'm telling you all this story because in art and culture, I have to connect all of them. To connect all of them, I want you to know certain things. So he just fell from the library and he fractured his skull and Humayun died. The moment Humayun died, he nominated whom as his successor? Akbar. 13-and-a-half-year-old boy becomes the ruler of Hindustan. When Humayun died, Akbar was there at Punjab. So he was with his teacher Bairam Khan. So Humayun was temporarily buried at that library only. Temporarily he was buried. Immediately there was a warrior called Hemu, Hemachandra, Hemraj, Hemachandra. He came to Delhi, occupied the throne. So Akbar could not do anything because Akbar is at Punjab. Hemu has taken the throne. Akbar from Punjab is coming to Delhi. Hemu from Delhi is going towards Punjab. They both met at Panipit. So the second battle of Panipit was fought between Akbar and Hemu. Akbar defeated Hemu and Hemu was killed. Akbar comes back to Delhi and occupied the throne and established himself to be the ruler. So a 13-and-a-half-year-old boy killing a great warrior called Hemu Vikramaditya. That is a beginning. When Akbar came, it was like a hero introduction. When Rajinikanth comes in a movie, we start with the introduction song. Rajini will not enter without a song. Are you getting it? Same thing, when Akbar sat, he sat with that hero introduction only. Because Akbar had good HR, good advertisement team. He had lots of MBA graduates. They were advertising Akbar, telling Akbar killed him, Akbar, all HR, all that worked. Promotion was so good, everyone knew Akbar. And a small boy killing a great ruler in those days, it required some sort of quality and skill. So then Akbar becomes the ruler, the greatest ruler of Indian history. So study Akbar thoroughly because without Akbar there is no medieval. Without Gandhi there is no modern. Without Ashoka, Buddha, Mahavir there is no ancient. These people will definitely come in prelims. If they don't come, they'll be angry. Are you getting it? So UPSC will definitely ask them, so you have to thorough them. There are some topics which every year it will come. Vijayanagar will come every year when you look at it. Sangam will come every year. Buddha or Mahavir will come alternatively. Indus Valley will come. Akbar, Mughals will come. Either Akbar will come or his grandson will come or his grandfather will come. Someone will come because Mughals are always in the scene because today we are talking that we should not study the Mughals. NCERT is now planning, let's abolish the Mughals. Lots of talks are going on. Why to study Mughals? Mughals have corrupted, blah, blah, blah. Leave all the debates, but Mughals are an issue. Why are you getting it? Because they've done something. Good, bad, everywhere it is there. But as an issue, it is there. So generally, I don't go into debatable issues. I don't get into any arguments and discussions. I go with the pattern of history. So even though you ask me, ma'am, this is there, that's a waste of time. And ultimately, it's like peeling an onion. You peel an onion, you get nothing out of it. Maybe we can have some laughter, we can have some fun, we can have some jokes and go sit. But for your exam, you will have nothing. So Akbar ruled for 49.5 years. Akbar ruled. And when Akbar ruled, the greatest rule of Indian history was Akbar's rule. Because when you look at Akbar, I told you he shifted all the capital. Akbar annexed all the North Indian kingdoms by waging huge wars. Akbar believed in war. You cannot win a kingdom by suppression. If you threaten a king, if the kingdom surrenders, tomorrow the kingdom will get up and fight. So Akbar believed in suppression. That is why Akbar attacked Mewar. He attacked Kashmir. He attacked Bengal. He attacked Bihar. So all the kingdoms Akbar used to attack. He attacked Orissa, Gondwana. He attacked all the kingdom and Akbar annexed. And Akbar was a man of architecture. The base of Mughal architecture began with Akbar. Everything what Akbar had, Akbar introduced paintings in Mughal Empire. The concept of Kathak dance was glorified. Tomorrow we'll be touching that art and culture topic. It developed with Akbar only. So Akbar was a man of art, a highly an artistic person. Art developed with Akbar. That is, wherever Akbar went, you will have a touch. So we all say Midas touch. Have you heard Midas touch? Someone touch. Wherever there's a person called Midas, he touch, everything will transform into gold. There's a small story. Are you getting? He took a blessing that whatever he touched will become gold. So one day what happened? He forgot and he touched himself. He became gold. Are you getting it? So like that, everything turns out to be a fortune. Likewise, we call it as Akbar's touch. Wherever Akbar touched, a reform developed. Everywhere, Akbar reformed the army. Akbar reformed the policy. He reformed the administrative setup. Why? Because he had beautiful commanders with him. Great commanders were there with him, like Man Singh, like economist called Todarmal. Akbar had a very close friend called Raja Birbal, the court jester. Akbar had a general called Raja Bhagwan Das. Akbar had a historian called Abul Fazl. Getting it? Akbar had a close friend called Abdur Rahim. So they are all called Navaratnas. Learn the 9 names thoroughly. Navaratnas of Akbar. So wherever Akbar goes, they used to guide Akbar and they used to protect Akbar, and Akbar used to hear from everyone. When something goes wrong, Akbar used to correct it. When something is right, Akbar used to appreciate. So 49.5 years of rule, Akbar gave wonders to India. That's why, we call that peak of the Mughal rule was seen with Akbar. And he was a highly secular person. Akbar was not into any religion. Being a Sunni Muslim, he grew up in a Rajput background, and he had lots of Rajput wives. Akbar had a wife from Gujarat. He married a Kashmiri wife. Getting it? Akbar had, everywhere. Akbar, that matrimonial alliances of Akbar made Akbar a very liberal person. So since Akbar was a liberal person, in 1581, he introduced a new faith called Deen Ilahi. So Deen Ilahi is a universal faith where everyone could follow, where all God is one. Monism. What is monism? All God is one is monism. Akbar developed that. When Akbar gave that, he became very popular there, and Akbar was very much glorified. But at times great rulers fall by a plan in the family. Akbar's son was notorious, Jahangir. So Jahangir wanted to secure the throne. He raised a revolt on Akbar that shattered Akbar. Akbar couldn't digest it. So in 1605, Akbar died. When he died, he nominated his son, Jahangir, Salim, who took a title called Jahangir and became the ruler. So Jahangir continued the footstep of his father. Nothing great took place. But one achievement of Jahangir is he had a capable administrator with him. That is his chief queen called Noor Jahan. So Noor Jahan played a very crucial role in Jahangir's politics. Noor Jahan's father became the Wazir of the Mughal Empire. Noor Jahan's brother became the commander-in-chief of the Mughal Empire. So are you getting it? So the entire Noor Jahan, she started to dominate. The first female to get her coins stuck was Noor Jahan. Her coins were there. Mughals had Noor Jahan coins being stuck, silver coins were there. So Noor Jahan was very popular throughout the history during Jahangir, and Jahangir was an excellent painter. Painting developed so well with Jahangir. We'll do it tomorrow. Because he himself was a great painter and he was a naturalist. He gave more importance to natural elements. All sorts of painters were invited to the court. We'll do painting tomorrow. So Jahangir died. He did nothing great. Getting it? Then his son Shah Jahan becomes the ruler. Shah Jahan continued the footstep of his grandfather Akbar. The first Mughal ruler to have pan-India was Shah Jahan. So Shah Jahan, he had pan-India and he was a kind of a rigid ruler. He had lots of money with him because Mughal Empire was a wealthy empire. Mughal Empire competed with Russia and China. It was the richest empire of the world, one of the richest. And it was the third largest empire of the world next to China and Russia, Mughals. They were so glorified. So this Shah Jahan, he was a man of architecture. All the money what Shah Jahan had, he spent it on architecture. The best example, Taj Mahal, Red Fort, Juma Masjid, the Moti Masjid, all the gates in Delhi, all of them were constructed by Shah Jahan. So we call him as a man of architecture. Then during a war of succession, he had 4 sons. All the sons began to quarrel. And one son, Aurangzeb, he just imprisoned Shah Jahan in the Agra fort and he took the power. The longest Mughal ruler was Aurangzeb. Akbar ruled for 49.5 years. Aurangzeb ruled for 50 years. Are you getting it, ma? So 2 months extra will come for Aurangzeb. And one irony, the maximum number of Hindu nobles was seen in whose court? Aurangzeb's court. So Akbar never had maximum number of Hindu nobles. Aurangzeb was a fanatic Muslim. He believed that Islam was the only good religion in the world and it's his duty to convert everyone to Islam. So Aurangzeb thought, I have to convert everyone. My duty is to convert people. So he used force to convert people. When someone used force to convert people, we call them fanatic. So are you getting it? Or we use a term bigot. B-I-G-O-T. Who's a bigot? Someone who converts anyone and tell that you have to convert to my religion. You don't, I will kill you. Threatening someone. Fanatic is aligning yourself to your religion and thinking that is only great. Not hearing any other religion. Mine is only great. My religion is only super. Mine is only there. You should all follow only my religion. Are you getting it? So Aurangzeb was a fanatic and a bigot. So he tried to convert everyone to Islam by force. In this process, he killed many. He killed the 9th Sikh Guru, Tej Bahadur. He killed Shivaji's son, Shambhaji. He killed many Portuguese, travelers. So Aurangzeb killed many. In the process of, he killed, many people who raised a revolt. The Kashi priest, the temple priest in Kashi Vishwanath temple, when he broke the temple, he killed the priest there. He broke the Somnath temple. He broke the Keshav Dev temple at Mathura. He suppressed the Jats. The Jats, everyone, killing, suppression, breaking temple. He had a special officer. He appointed special officers called Muktasibs only to break temple. Their duty was to break only temples. So I'll give you the list of temples tomorrow because tomorrow is only the art and culture temple part. So he broke many temples. And I think few months back, Hindu covered an article about one temple, the Keshav Dev temple at Mathura. So that's in current affairs. Aurangzeb only broke it. Kashi Vishwanath temple, he broke it. Gyanvapi mosque. So are you getting much? So tomorrow you'll be writing lots, as I keep on telling you again and again, because tomorrow is the entire architecture, painting, dance, music, puppetry, and all of them. So once he broke all of them, he constructed mosque there called Idgah. I-D-G-A-H. Idgahs were constructed everywhere. Why? To propagate Islam. Many temples in Kashmir, because Aurangzeb's empire was from Kashmir in north, Jinji in Tamil Nadu. Jinji is near Madras. So his empire was from Kashmir to Jinji. This side he had what? The Hindu Kush range and the Arakan mountain. Such a huge empire was Aurangzeb's empire. So such a greatest warrior. And he was also a man who was not defeated. People feared him. because he was very strict and a disciplinarian. He was an excellent Veena player. But since Islam prohibits music, he broke all the Veena. He was an excellent instrumental player. Instrumental music, he plays so well. But Islam prohibits music, he broke all of them. And many Kathak dancers were there in the court. He asked all of them to vacate Delhi. No one should dance in Delhi. No one should dance. If you dance, I'll cut your leg. Go. So they all vacated Delhi. If you sing any song, I'll cut your tongue. Go. So many ran away. So people from Delhi, they went to Agra, they went to Gwalior, they went to Jaipur, they went to Bikaner, they went to different parts. So Gharanas developed. Gar Ana, go back to your homes or come back to our homes. So regional music developed because of Aurangzeb. So a singer leaving Delhi, going to Gwalior, Gwalior Gharana developed. The Rajput rulers welcomed all these singers to their court. So many went to Jaipur. The Lucknow rulers welcomed many of them where. So Islamic music went there to Lucknow. Hindu music went on to Jaipur. So that's why we have two forms of Kathak. Lucknowi Kathak. We have Jaipur Kathak. Jaipur Kathak is a Hindu version of Kathak. They dance on Hinduism. Ramayana, Mahabharata. They keep a bindi. They wear the Gagra Choli. Jaipur Kathak. Lucknow Kathak is Islamic Kathak. They wear that big anarkali. They wear that Islamic costume. They dance for Salim, Sheba stories. Are you getting it, ma? Laila Majnu, those kind of romantic themes. So Kathak itself got divided into two because of Aurangzeb. Because dancers were from all faith. So accordingly, they started moving. And accordingly, it started getting patronized. So Aurangzeb banned everything. And in 1707, he died. The moment he died, there were many people waiting to take up the empire. But the moment he died, there was a war of succession among his sons. And the empire broke. Since the Mughal Empire disintegrated, historians have stopped medieval India with the death of whom? With the death of Aurangzeb. So Aurangzeb died, medieval India gets over. So Rajputs, Delhi Sultanate, Mughals. These are the three topics. When you look at the PYQ again, we did get question about Akbar, architecture, painting, about their buildings, getting about their policy, about Babur. We are getting question. Even in Delhi Sultanate, Muhammad bin Tughlaq, Firoz Shah Tughlaq, Iltutmish, Balban, Alauddin Khilji. We are getting question. The question will never be factual. I told you 2% is fact, but remaining is all conceptual. So generally when you look at the PYQ, see UPSC is telling us that look at the previous year question and follow me. They're giving us something. So when you look at the PYQ, we get a pattern. Maybe they ask you like this. Every 10 years, well, they keep changing the pattern. 2013, they changed the pattern actually. 2013, there was a big change in the pattern. 2023, they changed the pattern. So we believe 2024 prelims will have the same 2023 pattern. Because every 10 years only they keep a pattern change. If you look at it, optionals will go differently. GS pattern will change differently. The last optional change was in 2018. 2018, I think they changed and deleted many topics in many optional, included many parts in many optional, 2018. But GS pattern is in 2013. When you know the amendment, when you know the change, we're very smart enough to go with the track. It's like a snake would know a snake. You follow the snake, you become a snake and you clear the exam. It's just, they're giving you a path. This is how I'm going. So likewise, you have to thorough the PYQ. Thorough in the sense, get to know how are they asking. Are you getting, how are they going? Are they going into the detail? Are they going into facts? Are they going, you'll get the percentage list. Max to max, if you sit all alone with that book, the PYQ book, max to max, you sit half an hour, you will be able to sense it. But the problem here is, students want teachers to tell, they don't sit. I always say, you sit and you see, you do it. When you see it, you will know. When you do an analysis or nothing like that, maybe I can tell you what, because we are here for that only. But when you feel that, you will take it. Like this, you will take it. The teachers tell study. Parents tell you study. Friends tell you study. But when you feel that you want to study only, you will open the book. Isn't it? Yes or no? You'll be opening the book and you'll be doing something. Maybe if I look at you, I'll be thinking you're studying. But you'll be dreaming something. But when you really want to study, only then you will study. So that feel you should only get. So please do that analysis, take the PYQ and then have a look what pattern they are asking. How is UPSC going? From there, slightly shift your base and just start thinking with the topics. This applies for all the subject, not only for history. Every subject is like this only. And every year, ancient, medieval, art and culture, the numbers of questions are getting more. Last year we had 21 questions in history, 21, which is 42 mark. Among that, only 5 was modern. Among 21, only 5 was modern. Remaining was all AMC, ancient medieval culture. So imagine the weightage. Mains, it's just the shift. Modern is more. Are you getting it? They are asking more. So don't go like, I'll study this less, I will study this more. Study all of them together. There are some questions where they connect it and ask. They connect. Option 1 will be ancient. Option 2 will be medieval. Option 3 will be modern. They can ask you to compare. Attempt. There are some pattern like that also. So keep a track. Keep on revising. So this is about the North Indian part, the Rajputs, the Delhi Sultanate and Mughals. When you come here to South India, coming on to South India, the first topic is the great Cholas. We call them as later Cholas. We call them as later Cholas. Rajaraja Chola comes here only. When you look at the bracket, 850 to 1258 AD is the bracket of Cholas. So getting it, ma? So here Cholas come into the picture and here who's the major 2 ruler? Rajaraja Chola and his son Rajendra Chola. They took the Chola Empire to heights. These two are the 2 greatest rulers you need to study. Beyond this, you need not study anything. Because the expansion became so big under them both. The entire peninsular India, along with Southeast Asia, was taken by these 2 rulers only. And these Cholas, what is the outcome? When you look at the Cholas, what are we going to learn? I want you to learn rulers. All the Chola rulers, getting it? Number 2, architecture. And that we'll be doing it tomorrow again. Temple. Have you heard Brihadishwara temple? That part. So getting it? Have you heard Chidambaram Nataraj temple? So like that, we have certain things there. So rulers, I want you to know the ruler. I will give you the list of the rulers just to give you an idea. The first ruler, Vijayalaya. Vijayalaya is the founder of the later Chola, followed by the second ruler, Aditya Chola. So Aditya Chola was a son of Vijayalaya. And this Aditya Chola, we call him as the real founder. He was a real founder of the Chola. Then after father, son, all primogeniture. The third ruler we have Parantaka Chola. Parantaka Chola, son of Aditya. Just the chronology. To give you basics in GS. So Vijayalaya, Aditya, Parantaka. So after Parantaka, I directly go to Rajaraja Chola. Getting the bracket of Rajaraja Chola, 985 to 1014. Learn the bracket at least so that you will understand. Okay, Rajaraja ruled in this period. I showed you the megalith of Rajaraja Chola. The greatest Chola ruler was Rajaraja Chola. He annexed all the kingdoms and the peninsular India came under the control of Chola. So getting it, we all have heard about it. Naval supremacy developed. He had friendly ties with all the kingdom. He was a great Shiva Bhakta. Why are we talking about Rajaraja Chola? Because of the PS movie. And many are writing articles about Rajaraja, the Chola legacy, Rajendra. Getting after the movie, everyone started writing. And again, Hindu covered an article. Rajaraja appointed, you would have found, if you would have studied the current affairs, Rajaraja appointed women priest in the temple called Oduvar. Day after tomorrow we'll be touching. So which means women priests were appointed by which ruler? Rajaraja. So there is a term for that. So Hindu, in the front page of Hindu, there was an article about Rajaraja Chola. And Rajaraja Chola is known for his Sengol. So we have 3 issues for Rajaraja Chola in current affairs. Sengol, the movie, and that women priest. So getting it? So day after tomorrow when I teach you current affairs, we have to connect which ruler? Rajaraja. I'll tell you a small brief about Rajaraja. He was 16 years old when he became the ruler. 16, not 60, 16 years old. From his childhood, he was a scholar. He was a scholar, he knew all the languages. And he was a great military commander. When he was 16 years old itself, he used to fight battles for the Chola army. Not a Senapati, but he used to fight in the name of relatives, kith and kin. Because the previous ruler of Rajaraja Chola was his own brother. Are you getting? His own brother was the previous ruler, Uttama Chola. So he was a ruler. So when Rajaraja Chola became the ruler at 16 years old, he wanted to take the Chola glory to a height. So he fought with all the kingdom and he made the peninsular India under his control. And who were the contemporaries of Rajaraja Chola? If you look at Rajaraja Chola, okay, I'll put it here. If you look at Rajaraja Chola, North India had Rajputs. Look at the bracket. Look at the bracket. Rajputs are there till 1206. Rajaraja's bracket. Ghazni, 1000. So getting it? So here we have the Rashtrakutas. Here we have the Eastern Chalukyas of Vengi. Cholas are here. Cheras are here. Pandyas are here. Rajaraja defeated them all and annexed it. So he annexed Ceylon. He annexed Southeast Asia. He annexed Lakshadweep. Today Lakshadweep we are talking. The first ruler to occupy Lakshadweep. After the Maldives issue, Maldives, don't go to Maldives, go to Lakshadweep. The first ruler to occupy Maldives was Rajaraja Chola. The first ruler to occupy Lakshadweep, Rajaraja Chola. So you have to tell Maldives that we had you and you're telling us not to come. You're telling us India dirty people. They're spoiling our beaches. They're only telling. So now we are going to Lakshadweep. But both these islands, Maldives and Lakshadweep, was under whose control? Rajaraja Chola only. So he annexed it. So such a great ruler was Rajaraja. That is why he was called as what? The greatest Chola ruler. And since he expanded the kingdom till here, it is called Imperial Chola. Have you heard the term? Imperial. What is imperialism? Traveling overseas and taking control of a particular region. So we call it as Imperial Chola or Greater Chola because of that only. So he became so great, he was a hardcore Shiva Bhakta, Shaivite. So he thought he wanted to, one day when he got coronated, whenever Cholas get coronated, after coronation, they have the habit of going to a temple. Any good things we start, we go to a temple. So after taking a coronation, he went to the Kailashnath temple at Kanchipuram. He went to Kanchipuram from Tanjore, because their capital now is Tanjavur. Early Chola, Urayur. Now from Tanjavur, he is going to Kanchipuram to take blessings from the temple, from Lord Shiva. And that Kanchipuram temple was built by the Pallavas. When he went and saw the Kanchi Kailashnath temple, he was taken aback. He was like awestruck with the beauty of the temple. So there he decides that I should construct a temple like this, but bigger than this. He comes back to the kingdom, annexes all the kingdom. Then in 1010 AD, he constructed the Brihadishvara temple. That's why we say Brihadishvara temple was constructed on seeing which temple as a model? The Kanchi temple, Kailashnath temple at Kanchipuram. So that's what Pallavas built it. Who replaced Pallavas? Chola. So Cholas had come. So chronology is fine. So are you getting it? So he constructed the temple. Today that Brihadishvara temple is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Then he died naturally. Then his son Rajendra Chola became the ruler. He was like, as I told you, he was equal to his father. I told you great father, great son. That combination was Rajendra Chola. He expanded tremendously. The first ruler to occupy Australia was Rajendra Chola. So Rajendra went till Australia. The first ruler to occupy Andaman and Nicobar Islands was Rajendra Chola. So Rajendra was extra a mile than his father. So his glory also went so big. Getting it? That Rajendra became a great warrior. And he also followed the footstep of his father. And he was the first ruler to defeat the Pala ruler or North Indian ruler called Mahipala III. And he occupied Palas. The Palas of Bengal, Rajputs are there. But he didn't annex North India. Why? Because he was into that cultural element. He wanted that his culture to be with him. Because North had a different culture. South had a different culture. He never wanted the differentiation there. So he did not annex North India due to cultural difference. But that Pala ruler told Rajendra Chola that I can gift you anything. Do you want something? I can gift you. So Rajendra asked him that, give me the waters of Ganga. So immediately Rajendra came down and constructed a city called Gangai Konda Cholapuram, symbolifying the waters of Ganga has come to Tamilagam. So that is the might of Rajendra Chola. So big he was, and after him, weak successors continued. But one achievement of Rajendra Chola, when we look at it, all the Tamil text, what was all scattered, Rajendra Chola took all of them and he compiled them. That's why Rajendra Chola is called Pandita Chola, Pandit. Like we say Pandit Nehru, he was called the Pandit Chola. Why? Because Rajendra was a scholar. All the great works of the Bhakti saint of South, the Alvars and Nayanmars, we call it as Tirumurai. Like all the Alvars and Nayanmars, they compiled, all of them were taken together. And that compilation was done by Rajendra Chola. So literature developed during Rajendra Chola. So that is a contribution what we see with Rajendra Chola. And Cholas were the first to introduce local self-government. The modern Panchayat Raj system, the precursor to that is our Cholas only. So they laid their foundation. But after Rajendra, weak successors continued and Cholas diminished. And finally, by 1258 AD, they came to an end. So contribution of Cholas might be a mains question. Generally we get, last year we had Chola sculptural art, Gupta and Chola sculpture, comparison in mains. Dravidian style of temple architecture, we had it in our mains. So generally they ask you in architecture because they are known for their temples, they are known for their statues, they are known for their administration. In prelims, what can they ask? They can ask you contemporary, they can ask you about how they laid the foundation and what is their policy. When you look at it, the same Sangam polity, the Sangam society, the Sangam religion will continue here because they are also the same Tamils. The Sangam, the people, they are same, they are not different. The same legacy is continuing. So they are also following the same pattern only. So they don't have a very different pattern here. So by 1258, they came to an end. So only Pandyas and Cheras are there. Cholas are out. Zero, full stop. By 1258, Sundara Pandya defeated the last ruler and he occupied the Chola kingdom. And now Pandyas are only there. So the first South Indian kingdom is later Chola. Now the second South Indian kingdom, we call it as the Vijayanagar Empire. So when did Vijayanagar Empire come up? It came in 1336 and it was there till 1672. Yeah. It is justified. Yeah. Essence is slightly with world history, it is different, but people use the term. So we are also continuing. As a legacy, we continue. Because Cholas never exploit it. Yeah, you can. Their political policies were seen in other countries. Indonesia practiced Chola policy. Cambodia practiced Chola policy. So politically, when you influence a country and they follow your footstep, we call them as imperial master. After the Queen's proclamation, we became what? Britishers became our imperial master. Whatever they said, we listened. So in that aspect, whatever Chola said, you listen. That is what we call it as imperialism. But colonialism is exploitation. Cholas never colonized. India has never colonized anyone. Clear, ma? Vijayanagar Empire. So capital, initial capital, Anegudi. And later, Hampi. So where is Anegudi? Where is Hampi? Both at Karnataka. So the capital of Vijayanagar initially was Anegudi, later Hampi. And again the court language of Vijayanagar, Kannada, followed by Telugu, followed by Tamil, followed by Sanskrit. So Kannada was a basic language. Vijayanagar Empire was Kannada. Kannada was a court language. And if you look at Vijayanagar Empire, you know who was the founder? The founders were two brothers. We call them as good. Harihara and Bukka. Harihara and Bukka. We call them as founder. So I've given you the founder, we have the court language, we have the capital. Early capital is Anegudi, Hampi. Hampi is called as a golden city, and this Hampi is on the banks of river Tungabhadra. So this was once a PYQ. Getting it, ma? This Hampi, founder Harihara, this was once a PYQ. And you know, they were great temple builders. Vijayanagar Empire was great temple builders, and this Vijayanagar Empire is divided into 5 dynasties. Sorry, it's divided into 4 dynasties. Divided into 4 dynasties. Just learn the name only. It's called Sangama dynasty, Saluva dynasty, Tuluva dynasty, Aravidu dynasty. Just know them. You have to like Slave, Khilji, Tughlaq, Sayyid, Lodi, Sangama, Saluva, Tuluva, Aravidu. They were the 4 dynasties which comes in Vijayanagar Empire. Krishna Deva Raya belongs to the Tuluva dynasty. And the Tuluva dynasty, they had a regional language called Tulu. So Krishna Deva Raya's mother tongue was Tulu, but his court language was Kannada. He was writing in Telugu. He spoke Tamil. He knew Sanskrit, scholar. That's why, you know, kings were multilingual. Kings were scholars. Kings tried to adopt all the pattern, whatever was existing. That's why we call them as what? Kings. So this is how the kingdom made. Now, why did they come? And in 1336, if you look at the contemporary, who's the contemporary of Vijayanagar Empire? Muhammad bin Tughlaq. So in 1336, who's the North Indian ruler when Vijayanagar came? Muhammad bin Tughlaq. 1672, who's the Mughal ruler? Aurangzeb. So Vijayanagar Empire is a contemporary of Tughlaq, Sayyid, Lodi, Mughals. Are you all getting it? So empire, look at the bracket. If you go with the bracket, it's fine. And this Vijayanagar Empire, their rival kingdom, they had an enemy kingdom. The rival kingdom was Bahmani or Bamini kingdom. So we call Vijayanagar and Bamini. Bamini is not that much in our syllabus, we don't get it. But Vijayanagar is there. Bamini is an Islamic state. Bamini kingdom was the first Muslim state of South India. Getting it, Islamic rule entered in South only with Bahmani kingdom. And these both were fighting very frequently. They were like India and Pakistan. They kept on fighting frequently, Vijayanagar and Bamini. Whenever there was a strong Vijayanagar ruler, he will defeat the Bamini and subdue. Whenever there was a strong Bamini ruler, he will defeat Vijayanagar and he will subdue. Have you heard a battle called Battle of Talikota? A big battle called Battle of Talikota. The Bamini kingdom only fought with Vijayanagar. Getting it, ma? So at that point of time, Krishna Deva Raya was not there. He just died and the Battle of Talikota took place. See this part, if you look at the PYQs previous year, we do get questions on Krishna Deva Raya because the only greatest ruler of this dynasty was Krishna Deva Raya. You need to know him, number 1. Krishna Deva Raya was an expansionist. There are many rulers. I told you, Sangama, Saluva. And Vijayanagar is known for paintings. They developed paintings like anything, number 1. Number 2, temple architecture grew tremendously under Vijayanagar. Have you heard the great temples of Hampi? Today it's called the ruins of Hampi. Hampi was completely destroyed. Why? Because the Bamini broke them. In the Battle of Talikota, they destroyed Hampi and they broke all the temples of Hampi. So today, ruins of Hampi is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And all the great temples, they built it. And Krishna Deva Raya was a secular person. He not only built temple, he constructed even mosque. He constructed even Islamic schools. So those kind of architecture. So painting, dance, music, architecture, puppetry. These 5 are art and culture topic. These 5 was promoted by which ruler here? Krishna Deva Raya. See, generally in history, some rulers will promote dance. Akbar never promoted dance. Akbar promoted painting. Akbar promoted architecture. So only 2 we can give. 2 marks. Akbar dance, Akbar painting, Akbar architecture. But all the art forms, what we have in India, only 2 rulers promoted all the art forms like painting, dance, music, puppetry, getting it, sculpture, building, everything. One was Rajaraja Chola. So Rajaraja Chola promoted all art forms, painting, dance, music, puppetry. Pallavas, Mahendravarman, he was in a very different ball game. But again, when you look at all of them, one was Rajaraja Chola, the second ruler was Krishna Deva Raya, and these two kings contributed. So getting it, ma? So have you heard Tanjore painting? Are you getting it? Here we call it as Lepakshi painting. Have you heard a puppetry called Bommalatam? Like Katputli. Here it is called Tolu Bommalata. Have you heard about Kuchipudi? Here. There Bharatanatyam. Getting it? So likewise, Chola sculpture, Vijayanagar sculpture. Chola temple painting, Vijayanagar temple painting. Chola architecture, Vijayanagar architecture. So Chola music, Carnatic music. Getting it? We have Vijayanagar music. Both are Carnatic, but they have a very different set. Because the Carnatic music exactly developed during this period. Purnadasa, the father of Carnatic music, lived in Vijayanagar Empire only. So getting it, ma? So the three great teachers, acharyas of music, they lived in Vijayanagar Empire only. The music reached the heights during Vijayanagar only, heights, climax. So everywhere, ma, that's what we call them as cultural kingdom. So Chola and Vijayanagar are called cultural kingdom. You take anything in culture. What is culture? Language, they developed, they both. Music, they developed. Painting, they developed. Puppetry, they developed. Again, architecture, both, they developed. So that is why we call them as what? The great patrons of art and architecture, particular. And both of them patronized what? They had great scholars. Like Krishnadeva Raya had 8 great scholars called Ashtadiggajjas. Like, Shivaji's Ashtapradhan. He had like Akbar's Navaratna. He had 8 scholars called Ashtadiggajjas. So all these scholars were asked and given a work to do. So that's what promotion of architecture is what. There was one mains question. If you look at your PYQ mains, the only question 12.5 mark was only with Krishnadeva Raya. So he himself came in mains as a single entity. No ruler has come separately in mains, particularly in GS mains history. They generally club, but the only person who just came as a separate entity was whom? Krishnadeva Raya. So he was a very big person, but art and culture is very important. He comes with Tuluva dynasty. See, all great rulers will have something in common. They'll be military strategists, they'll be strong, they'll have a great army, they'll have scholars, they'll have economists, they will promote art and architecture. When they do all of them collectively, what happened? And basically, the character of the ruler will be visible in their policies. Because I generally tell this always, priorities are policies for a ruler. Priority. So the king wanted to do something, he prioritized on that, he makes a policy and that becomes a rule. So likewise, Krishnadeva Raya was always there. And today we talk about many temples, Vijayanagar architecture. The famous Tirupati temple was constructed during Vijayanagar. All the temples of Tirupati was constructed. The foundation of Tirupati was laid by Krishnadeva Raya, but the temple became expanded and so big under Vijayanagar rulers only. And their architecture is called as a separate style. Are you getting it? It's called the Vesara style too. Are you getting it? So we have a different style. We call it as Pravida. There's another name for it. So this is about Vijayanagar here. So Rajputs, Delhi Sultanate, Mughals, North India, South India we have Cholas, we have Vijayanagar. And the moment Vijayanagar broke in 1672, one kingdom broke because Vijayanagar had feudalism. By now feudal lords were there. The feudal lords of Vijayanagar were called Nayaks. Nayak, they were called as Udayar. They were called as Polygar. When Vijayanagar broke in 1672, one Udayar group, they took the kingdom in Mysore. The Chandragiri kingdom of Mysore, the Udayar dynasty of Mysore, then the Nayaks of Madurai, they broke and they started taking up. From that Udayar dynasty of Mysore, there was a soldier called Hyder Ali. Modern India starts from there. Hope you're getting it. So Vijayanagar ends with the breakage. We have Chandragiri kingdom, Udayar kingdom, Karnataka, Mysore, modern state. So after this, and Krishnadeva Raya was only ruler who nailed Cheras, who nailed Pandyas, who nailed Chola, Pandya, who nailed Pandyas and Chera, Krishnadeva Raya. So Vijayanagar occupied entire deep south and completely. Aurangzeb was the ruler here. That's why when you look at Aurangzeb's map, when you look at the political map, the tip of India, you'll keep like Kanyakumari, Rameshwaram, you will get a term called polygars. You will get a term polygar. Why? They were feudal lords of Vijayanagar only. So study the rulers, study what exactly happened as a policy. See, when your political, economic, social and religious topics are thorough, your art and culture will exactly sit inside. If you know which Krishna Deva Raya, what he did. So when we do the temple, automatically it will sit with you. So else it will be difficult. When I say Marco Polo came to India. Abdul Raza came to India. When I tell you the rule, Amma, they should be connected to the topic. That's why yesterday and today, I keep on telling you, make your basics strong. Because tomorrow when I compare it and make you sit in a particular topic, when I draw the Sanchi Stupa and I say Ashoka built it, you should know Ashoka. Are you getting? When I build another stupa and we say it was built by him, it should sit with the ruler. When I say Agra Fort, Akbar constructed it, it should sit. When I say that, okay, Kathakali was introduced by this ruler, it should sit. So getting it, so like that, it's tomorrow will be connection, because art and culture, you can't take it out from ancient medieval. Art and culture is a part of ancient medieval, but we teach it separately. Why? So that when political classes are done chronologically, art and culture will be easy. And there are some art and culture topic which is current, like puppetry, like folk painting, the current painting like Kalamkari, Madhubani. These are all the regional paintings of today. So these current ones and all, we have to do it. So again, that doesn't require any ancient or medieval. That is a contemporary topic. And then again in art and culture, we have the ministries, awards. We have a topic called awards. So Padma Award, we heard Padma Award. Who gets Padma Shri? You know Padma Award? Padma Shri, Padma Bhushan, Padma Vibhushan. Who gets Padma Award? Wow. Can a Padma Shri awardee get Padma Vibhushan? Can a Vibhushan get Bhushan? Tomorrow. Are you getting it? So what is the difference between a Padma Vibhushan and Padma Bhushan? High is fine. Difference. Hierarchy is there. Bharat Ratna, Padma and all of them. But what is the difference? Distinguish. So what is the color of the ribbon for Padma Shri? Brown. So getting it? What is the medal? What is the money amount? So what is the cash prize for Sahitya Academy Award? Oh, 1 lakh. What is the price for Lalit Kala Academy? Hi. Are you getting? So this is basic things. Can a Padma awardee get Bharat Ratna? Can a Padma awardee get Bharat Ratna? Sure? Perfect. Can a Paramveer Chakra awardee get Dronacharya award? If he is a teacher. If he is a teacher. Yes? Yes. Are you getting? Fine. So which means, slightly confusing. Paramveer Chakra, who gets Dronacharya, Arjuna award. So there is a topic in art and culture called awards. So we'll be doing it tomorrow. I'm going to teach you. Are you all there? I'm going to teach you, and we are going to take the previous 1 year Padma awardee, previous 1 year Drona awardee, previous, you have to get it, because current affairs, casually they'll ask you. So who was the last to receive Bharat Ratna? Who was the last one to get Bharat Ratna? Option. Utkarsh. Last one to get Bharat Ratna. Advani. Yeah. So getting it? See, GK is fine. Shh. Come. GK is fine. Tendulkar getting Bharat Ratna, Vajpayee getting it, Ambedkar getting it, Kamaraj getting it, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan getting it, it's all fine. But the topic award, who gets an award? Which was the first award in India? First award. No. In India. Option. No, this is fill in the blanks. The first award of India. Which award? I'm asking you. Don't say communal award. Not communal award. First award of India. Gopalacharya award. No Google, throw Google in the dustbin. No option, fill in the blank. Ancient India, ancient India. Ancient India, first award of India. I'm talking about ancient India. The first award in India was given. Award. Okay, fine. So getting stuck. Getting it? So we have a topic. Come. We have a topic called award. We have a topic called award. We have a topic called martial arts. We have a topic called puppetry. We have a topic called, these are all current topic. This doesn't have a link with our classes. But still, I will be connecting it. So we have to do that. But you need to know. Because now UPSC is wanting a civil servant aspirant to learn even the basics. What is the gap between the Padma awardee? Anyone can take any award in India, but there is some time gap. So we have to do that also. So we have to study all of them. So casual reading will not settle here. It will be connected with current. So tomorrow we'll do all of them there. So tomorrow we'll start with architecture, followed by painting, dance, music, puppetry, awards, martial arts. I hope you've heard them all. So we'll be doing all these topics tomorrow. Getting it? So you have to write lots, come with exercised hands. And day after tomorrow, come with super exercised hands. Are you getting it? So I stop here for today.